Bulavinaka, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up, a big cleanup is expected on Samoa's southern coast. Also,
their perspective, their culture, their language. We need to tell our story to our own people.
Media restrictions at CHOGM raises concerns. And later on,
this year we're expecting somewhere between 6 and 10 tropical cyclones.
Fewer cyclones expected in this season for the Pacific. Divers who have surveyed the New Zealand naval ship which sank off Samoa say it's damaged but stable and the fuel tanks are intact. The NZS Manawa Nui hit a reef off Upolu Island in Samoa on Sunday, taking nearly 1,000 tonnes of automotive fuel to the ocean floor. It's less toxic than crude oil but harder to clean up. RNZ reporter Louise Ternuth, who is on the ground, joins me. Salofalava Louise, I understand that you were out on the boat today with the divers. What did you see?
Talofa Susanna, yes, that's right. So I was out on the water today with the Defence Force. We went out to where the vessel is, which is about 2 kilometres offshore of Apa i Tonga. It was quite harsh conditions today, so we sort of had to take a specific journey through the reef, winding through the current, quite a specific path to get out there. Then we had to wait out some of those conditions, so it was a bit touch and go. But when we did get out there, you couldn't see much of the ship because obviously it's 30 to 40 metres below the surface. But what we've been told is that the ship is on its side, and we could see an oil slick on top of the water, and we could see 3 containers that had come off that ship. One of those was stuck on the reef out there.
There's reportedly no major oil leaks from NZS Manawa Nui. Is that still the case?
Yes, so as far as what we've been told, both from the New Zealand Defence Force and the Samoan government, there hasn't been any major oil leaks. When we were out on the boat today, though, we did see an oil slick on top of the water, and there was a smell of fumes. It was quite pungent, actually. But we have been assured that the oil is contained to the vessel at the moment. It's residual oil from the initial sinking of that vessel, and the 950 tonnes of fuel is still contained on that vessel, but they're yet to figure out how to get that out and yet to hear word on when that may be.
Have you spoken to any locals in the area, Louise? What are they saying? How concerned are they?
Absolutely. We've spoken to many locals on the ground here in Samoa, both tourism operators and local residents, and they're all quite anxious about salvaging this vessel. Now the focus for them is on salvaging it because passengers are safe, and as far as they're aware, the fuel and the oil has been contained to the ship. So now they just sort of want it out of the water and out near the reef, back onto shore. Obviously, they've got CHOGM in a few weeks' time on the 21st of October, so that's a really crucial meeting with the Commonwealth heads of government, and there'll be hundreds, if not thousands, of people coming into Samoa for that. So, you know, the village is looking beautiful. It's decorated in the flag colours. They're ready and waiting for visitors, but anxious about getting this vessel out by then because all eyes will be on how the vessel salvaging is handled both by the Samoan government but the New Zealand government and Defence Force in particular. So that's sort of where their focus has shifted, and they're just really anxious to get this sorted because it's still holidays and they've got people coming into their resorts wanting to swim, and although it's still safe to swim, there's still some concern out there about, you know, this large vessel that's just 2 kilometres offshore. It is worrying locals.
You touched on there, both the Samoan government and New Zealand are focusing on salvaging the vessel, but how long will the cleanup take, do you know?
That's the question that everyone's been asking, and as far as we're aware, we don't know yet. We've been told that it's likely going to take a lot of time and it's going to be quite difficult. For the time being, the focus this week is on that cleanup, so clearing some debris from the vessel, which is still underwater. There's still some debris out there from what we've been told, and the Defence Force is still salvaging items from on board the boat, things like equipment off the boat or things that obviously were just lost at sea. So there's still a lot out there that they are still cleaning up, and then the focus will be on salvaging the vessel. But the cleanup is the immediate focus at the moment, and it's the focus for the foreseeable future.
Pacific media watchdogs say the broadcast media in Samoa fear government censorship at the upcoming Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Apia. Their concerns prompted the Pacific Islands News Association and the Pacific Freedom Forum to ask Samoa's Prime Minister Fiamia Naomi Mataafa to lift media restrictions at the summit, which begins in just under 2 weeks. PINA's newly elected president, Kalafi Moala, says geopolitical tension in the region could lead to the recolonization of island nations, with China and America vying to invest in media outlets. Margot Staunton asked Mr. Moala about his concerns with CHOGM.
It has been communicated that there would be some meetings where media or journalists would be restricted. In other words, it's an issue of access. So that's a first concern. The other one is simply because Samoa is at the broadcasting there, and most of the major broadcasting in the region are government-owned or establishment-owned. There are few privately owned broadcasters. And so there's a concern that because of that there would be direct orders of restrictions for broadcast. Samoan media with their broadcast, there could be restrictions put on them, an order from government, and that is a concern. We have had those concerns expressed to us from the Samoan media people on the ground. That's why we're asking from PINA to please don't put any restrictions.
Local media in Samoa, are they being directed as to what they can and can't publish?
Well, they are concerned, and they, I'm sure, have heard through the grapevine that there would be restrictions on what they could be publishing or what they could be broadcasting, particularly the broadcasters. It is extremely critical for us in the Pacific, in our development into the future, that our stories are being told by us, not outsiders with their perspective, their culture, their language. We need to tell our stories to our own people, our own perspectives, our own issues, and our own languages, and that's important to us.
What's happening here with CHOGM is really a form of censorship, isn't it?
Anything that restricts and tries to influence the way we tell our stories, it's a step backwards. And what we're afraid of is that there could be another wind of recolonization where the powers that be, because of the geopolitical tension that's going on now between the West and China in the Pacific, that some of these powers are trying to influence and maybe recolonize us by trying to influence us in the way we practice media and we tell our stories. And unfortunately, this is done through a lot of funding that seems to be happening right now in the Pacific, where funding agencies are everywhere trying to offer funding to media in a certain way. And I think we need to be cautious to make sure that there are no strings attached, that we are not being funded in order to change our way of telling our stories. And we need to tell it our way and tell it within our own perspective, tell those stories in our context of our own cultures and our own language and our own priorities and the issues that affect us. That's very, very important. We're not just flying in on a plane and do stories on the ground for a couple of days and then fly out. We do live here. We're the ones that have impact on whether it's climate change, whether it's drugs or poverty, political tensions. We live here. We're the ones that are impacted by those issues. So we need to tell our stories our own way.
Mr. Moala says the restrictions are a sign the Samoan government wants to control and avoid bad press. RNZ Pacific has reached out to the government for a response without success. New Zealand's National Institutes of Water and Atmospheric Research are predicting fewer or a normal number of tropical cyclones in the southwest Pacific this season. The season starts in November and lasts through April. The risk of cyclones this year are expected to be higher near the Coral Sea, Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea, and to be reduced to the east. Caleb Fotheringham spoke with NIWA meteorologist Bednone.
This year we're expecting somewhere between 6 and 10 tropical cyclones during the season. So it is potentially fewer than the long-term normal. But it's important to point out that, it doesn't necessarily take a severe tropical cyclone for the impacts to be severe. And a line that we often use is that it only takes one really impactful tropical cyclone, to have a profound impact through either rain, wind, or waves offshore. So it pays to be prepared even in a season where potentially there could be slightly fewer in terms of the numbers.
Overall, it seems like there's going to be fewer cyclones, but in some places the risk has increased or is expected to be normal. Can you please tell me about that?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, one of the key drivers this year is La Nina, which is building in the ocean and atmosphere at the present time. And what La Nina does is it causes warmer ocean water to pile up in the western part of the Pacific. So island groups like Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, the Coral Sea region and out toward Queensland, these areas I think need to be on more of alert this year with that climate driver. So those island groups could see several potentially tropical cyclones. However, toward the central and eastern part of the basin, so from Fiji points eastward toward Tonga, Niue, the southern Cook Islands, these areas have normal to reduced likelihood of tropical cyclones, which now it's worth pointing out that those island groups do tend to experience a couple of tropical cyclones per season. So even in a season where there is normal or reduced amounts of activity forecast, they can still have an impact from a system. So, even if the risk is a little bit lower, that doesn't mean that there's no risk. These island groups in central and eastern part of the basin still should be prepared in case a system forms.
The cyclone season starts in November. Last year we had Cyclone Lola, which started around this time last year. How unusual was that?
Yeah, so we did see Cyclone Lola form in October of 2023. That system was also a Category 5. In fact, I think it was the earliest Category 5 on record for the basin. That was, I think, tied to the El Nino event that was occurring. There had been a couple of early season tropical cyclones during past strong El Nino events, especially in 1997. So it was quite unusual, but not unprecedented necessarily. This year, with La Nina, potentially the season may take a little bit longer to maybe get started and get kicked off, especially I think in the eastern part of the basin, where things typically will pick up during the late season, which carries through January, February through April. So it might be, the start might not be quite as thunderous as it was last year for the basin as a whole.
It seems like there has been a very active hurricane season in the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Sea area. Does that have any weighting on what happens in the South Pacific?
Yeah, so we have seen some very high impact hurricanes in the northern hemisphere, the Atlantic, this season, and that is tied to the really warm ocean water. That's one of the factors in the Atlantic. Now, as it pertains to the South Pacific, we have a bit of a different setup. In fact, the ocean temperatures in the kind of central and eastern part of the basin maybe not as unusually warm and as widespread the warmth as what we see in the northern hemisphere. So that's one factor. The other factor would be that the South Pacific has seen a long-term trend to slightly fewer tropical cyclones. In fact, the normal number decreased from 10 to 9 in the last 30 years. And that is actually something that's consistent with the climate change literature, that the storms that form, there may be slightly fewer overall, but the ones that do form could be more intense, especially if they form in parts of the basin that have very warm ocean temperatures or other environmental conditions are favorable toward their intensification. So we can't draw on what's happening in the Atlantic necessarily for the South Pacific, but there are still factors, guiding factors that would tell us that we could, through time, expect the intensity, the severe tropical cyclones to potentially become more common.
A musical celebration of Samoa's history and resilience will debut at the Princess Alexandra Hall Royal Overseas League in London next month. Titled Samoana, the concert will showcase the essence of the Samoan culture and highlight Samoa's journey to independence following its colonial rule under Britain, Germany and New Zealand. Led by award-winning Samoan baritone singer Benson Wilson, Samoana will feature other renowned Samoan opera singers who will perform a selection of classical songs from Germany, Māori waiata, folk songs and other special pieces. I caught up with Benson Wilson to talk more about Samoana.
Samoana is going to be a concert set in, well, we're performing in London, and I've pulled together some amazing Samoan artists that are based in the UK. And I thought it would be quite a nice event to celebrate the resilience that Samoa has shown, from being a colony to now being the chair of the Commonwealth for the next 2 years. I thought it would be a nice opportunity to celebrate the Samoans in the UK who have also shown that kind of resilience to making UK their home.
Speaking of the UK, what's the general perception or knowledge from the locals there of Samoa? Do they have a fair idea of the country?
Absolutely, yeah. I think there is a lack of education or knowledge within the UK itself about Samoa as a country. It is very, very much thought of as a small island nation. A lot of people don't actually know where on the globe, Samoa is. And I've even had people, say, "Oh, it's part of the Bahamas, right?" Or, "Oh, it's part of Australia." I've even had like, South America. But like Samoa itself, I think as a country and the identity that Samoa carries internationally is known. However, as a small nation, hasn't really been recognized. People haven't connected the dots back to mainland Samoa or the history that Samoa has with the UK, with New Zealand, with Germany. And I think Samoa has come a long way from being, a colony to now being respected and been given the whaaroalo to be the chair of the Commonwealth for the next 2 years.
There's an incredible lineup of performers for this concert. Could you just tell me who will be performing at Samoana?
Yes, so at Samoana, we've pulled together classical singers, and I think it's amazing that classical music isn't from the Pacific, and yet Samoans are excelling, within the realms of the classical music industry. For this concert, I've pulled together two amazing sopranos, so Witualangi Aivale Cole, who won the Lexus Song Quest before moving over to London, and the amazing soprano who happens to also be my wife, Isabella Moore, an internationally recognized soprano, but also a model. And then we have the amazing guitarist, Alex Heather from Wellington, also of Samoan heritage, who's like amazing at playing the Samoan ingi, and I think it's such a luxury to be able to share, Samoan guitar playing with international guests and with people who most probably haven't heard what Samoan guitar playing sounds like. And then we have Hanali Vaike, who will be performing as a Samoan dancer, or she will be autaupo for their evening, who will have two pieces, one more traditional and one more contemporary, because the way that Samoans have told our stories and the way of living has been through Siva Samoa. And then we have the amazing collaborative pianist of New Zealand heritage, Ben Kubiak, whom I studied with at the University of Auckland. He's currently at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, where I also did my master's. He's been working for New Zealand Opera, and it's amazing that we can get him on board to collaborate with him for this concert. And then we'll be displaying the artwork of the awesome artist based here in the UK, Luana Asiata. But throughout the evening, I want to have classical music, I want to have Samoan music, I want to have Waiata Māori present, because these are all the connections that Samoa has to the world and to the Commonwealth.
It's interesting that you point out that classical music, although it didn't originate from Samoa, a number of Samoans that have been involved in the genre, they've excelled in classical music. Why do you think that is?
Firstly, I think, I pay tribute to the likes of Dame Kiriti Kanoa, who showed us that this is a way forward, and this is a way that we can express ourselves through music. And the likes of Whakwitai Jonathan Lemalu, who also has an amazing career going, and he's a pioneer for us. But I think the deep connection that we have as Samoans singing classical music is the sharing of stories through song. And Samoa doesn't have a rich written history, but what we do have is a rich history that has been passed on orally, and we learn everything. We learn about our culture, we learn about our family history, genealogy through these chants and songs. And so I think Samoans aren't, it's something that we are very familiar with, which is telling stories and sharing stories, passing on mana through, our voices. But not only Samoans, all of our Pacific brothers and sisters who have picked up classical music as a form of expressing our mana.
And speaking of mana, just to wrap up our talanoa, what are you hoping that the audiences in the UK, what are you hoping they'll take away from the Samoana concert?
Also, speaking of mana, I've created an arts company called Mana Arts, and it's about sharing mana through our artwork, through our art, and sharing it with each other, with our audiences, with any of our clients. And I think, mana comes to play massively when it comes to sharing who we are as a people with our audiences overseas. Because when we stand on the stage, we don't only represent ourselves, we represent our villages, we represent our countries, we represent even our high schools. And I want people who attend Samoana concert this coming November to get a taste of what Pasifika or tangata moana, what our mana feels like. And that's a warm feeling, and that's a feeling that can only be portrayed through sharing our essence, sharing our mana on stage with whatever we do. But also, I want people to learn more about us, where we are everywhere. I couldn't believe that there are Samoans here in London, but we're everywhere. We're excelling, and we're thriving in all industries. And yes, we are a dot on the map, but the waves that we create from that dot are massive.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.